Throughout history, wars have been fought with swords, guns, and machines, but the greatest victories were decided long before the first strike. They were won in the minds of brilliant strategists, in the careful positioning of troops, in the deception of the enemy, and in the mastery of terrain. What if wars weren't won by sheer strength, but by pure strategy? From the disciplined formations of the ancient world to the psychological warfare of modern conflicts, the tactics used on the battlefield shaped not just the outcome of wars, but the course of civilization itself. Today, we dive deep into 10 military tactics that changed history, some so revolutionary that they are still studied and applied in warfare today. How did these strategies work? Who wielded them to greatness? And how did they alter the fate of nations? Prepare to witness the battlefield like never before. This is the power of strategy. This is how wars were truly won. But before we dive into these game-changing tactics, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories of history's greatest battles and strategies. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Now, let's begin our journey through the military tactics that shaped the world. Throughout history, the greatest victories were not always won by the largest armies, but by the smartest commanders. Strategy has always been the true key to dominance on the battlefield, outmaneuvering, outthinking, and outplaying the enemy. One of the most striking examples of this happened in 216 BCE, during the Battle of Cannae. The Carthaginian general Hannibal faced a Roman force nearly twice the size of his own, but instead of meeting them head-on, he used a brilliant tactical maneuver. He allowed the center of his line to collapse, drawing the Romans in only to surround them completely in a devastating double envelopment. In a single day, Hannibal annihilated nearly 50,000 Roman soldiers, proving that superior tactics could crush sheer numbers. And this was just one of many moments in history where strategy shaped the fate of entire civilizations. Today, we're unveiling 10 of the most powerful military tactics ever devised, some so effective that they are still studied and used to this day. We begin with one of the most iconic military formations in ancient warfare, the phalanx, a creation of the Greeks. This formation revolutionized close combat and would serve as the backbone of Greek warfare for centuries. The phalanx was first developed in the 8th century BCE, and it reached its peak during the classical period of ancient Greece, particularly under the leadership of the Spartan and Macedonian armies. It was used in numerous significant battles, including the famous Battle of Marathon 490 BCE, and the later campaigns of Alexander the Great in the 4th century BCE. The phalanx was a tight, rectangular formation of soldiers, typically around 8 men deep. Each soldier, known as a hoplite, carried a long spear, sarissa, and a large round shield, hoplon. The soldiers would stand shoulder to shoulder, with their shields overlapping to create an impenetrable wall of defense, while their spears jutted outwards, creating a deadly offensive force. The soldiers were arranged in such a way that they could support one another on all sides. The front lines formed a shield wall that was difficult for enemies to penetrate, while the second and third rows could push their spears forward over the heads of those in front, increasing the attack's range. It was a strategy built on discipline, cohesion, and overwhelming force where individual skill was secondary to the unity of the entire formation. The impact of the phalanx was nothing short of revolutionary. In battles like Marathon, the Greeks used this formation to decisively defeat the much larger Persian army, showing that superior tactics could overcome numerical disadvantages. The phalanx turned ordinary soldiers into a well-coordinated, nearly unstoppable force. The success of the phalanx also spread throughout the ancient world, influencing armies from the Romans to the Macedonians. Alexander the Great famously used a version of the phalanx to conquer vast territories from Greece all the way to India, forever altering the geopolitical landscape of the ancient world. The phalanx remained a dominant force until the rise of more flexible and mobile infantry tactics. However, its legacy lives on in modern warfare, as the importance of organized, coordinated, and disciplined formations is still evident in today's military strategies. So, the phalanx wasn't just a way to fight, it was a way to think. It showed the world that with proper training and unity, even the smallest of forces could challenge the might of a larger army. The very essence of teamwork and strategic defense was born here, making the phalanx one of the most important military innovations in history. Next, we turn to one of the most formidable military forces in history, the Roman legion. The Roman legion represented a revolutionary evolution in military tactics, taking flexibility and discipline to an entirely new level. The Roman legion was developed over centuries, beginning in the early Roman Republic around the 5th century BCE and reaching its peak during the reign of Augustus 27 BCE to 14 CE. It was the core of the Roman army and played a key role in the Roman Empire's conquest of much of Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. The Roman legion was built around the concept of flexibility and adaptability. Unlike the fixed, rigid formations of earlier armies like the phalanx, the legion was divided into smaller units called manipules, groups of around 120 soldiers. This structure allowed the Roman army to adjust to different battle conditions and move more fluidly during combat. Each legionnaire was armed with a short sword gladius, a large shield scutum, and a spear pilum. These soldiers fought in close formation, but they could also act independently when needed. The legion's most famous feature was its ability to adapt on the battlefield. While earlier formations were designed for direct confrontation, the Romans often fought in an organized, flexible manner that allowed them to exploit weaknesses in enemy lines. The Roman army's formations were arranged in a checkerboard pattern, with the first line consisting of experienced soldiers and the rear lines made up of younger or less experienced soldiers. This created an army that could sustain long battles, as fresh troops could quickly replace tired ones in battle. The impact of the Roman legion was profound. Its tactics were instrumental in the expansion of the Roman Empire. The flexibility of the legion allowed the Romans to adapt to different types of warfare, from open field battles to sieges and guerrilla warfare. The Romans were able to defeat armies much larger than their own, due to their superior organization, training, and adaptability. The Roman legion also influenced military organizations for centuries. Its structure and discipline became the model for later armies, including those of medieval Europe and modern military forces. The concept of flexible units, trained soldiers, and strategic formation was revolutionary in its time and set the stage for future military successes. The legacy of the Roman legion can be seen in today's military organizations, where adaptability, cohesion, and precise organization are still key principles. The ability to respond to evolving battlefield conditions remains one of the most enduring lessons from Roman military strategy. The Roman legion wasn't just a military force, it was a symbol of Roman innovation and strategic genius. With its adaptability, discipline, and formidable fighting style, the legion laid the foundation for an empire that would last over a millennium, showing the world that flexibility and organization could turn the tide of battle. Now, let's dive into a tactic that used the very land itself as a weapon: the strategy of scorched earth. This brutal, yet highly effective approach was employed by several powerful forces throughout history, including the Mongols, the Russians, and even Napoleon. Its main goal: to leave the enemy with nothing to use, making any attempt at invasion nearly impossible. The scorched earth strategy has been used by various armies, most famously by the Mongols, the Russians during the Napoleonic Wars, and by Napoleon himself in his invasion of Russia. It involves destroying everything in the path of the advancing enemy, burning crops, slaughtering livestock, and even burning down villages and towns to ensure the enemy has no resources left to sustain themselves. The Mongols first employed this strategy during their conquests in the 13th century under Genghis Khan, but perhaps the most infamous use of this tactic occurred during Napoleon's ill-fated invasion of Russia in 1812. The Russian army, under Tsar Alexander I, retreated into the vast frozen wilderness, burning villages and crops as they went, leaving Napoleon's army stranded and starving. The core idea behind the scorched earth tactic was simple yet devastating. By destroying the resources that the invading army would rely on, you ensure that their advance becomes not only physically difficult, but also psychologically crippling. In the case of the Mongols, for example, they would raid and burn the crops, making it impossible for their enemies to feed themselves or replenish their supplies. This strategy also demoralized the enemy, who was left with no hope of survival. During Napoleon's invasion of Russia, the Russians employed scorched earth to perfection. As Napoleon's Grand Army advanced deeper into Russian territory, they found their way blocked by an empty land. The peasants had either fled or been forced to abandon their homes, and all the food, shelter, and supplies were destroyed. The harsh winter conditions further exacerbated the situation. This left Napoleon's army vulnerable to starvation, disease, and the relentless Russian winter. The key to this strategy was not only the destruction of resources, but the careful timing. The scorched earth tactic had to be employed in conjunction with a strategic retreat, as the attacking army would eventually run out of supplies and morale. It was a tactic that used time and space to wear down the enemy, forcing them to retreat or face annihilation. The impact of the scorched earth strategy was immense. It turned entire regions into uninhabitable wastelands, which could have devastating consequences for both the invader and the local population. For the Mongols, it meant that they could advance rapidly and overwhelm larger forces without worrying about logistics. They didn't need to rely on supply chains. Everything they needed, they either brought with them or took from the land. In Napoleon's case, the scorched earth tactic was one of the primary reasons for his disastrous defeat in Russia. His army, initially strong, was weakened by the destruction of resources and the brutal winter. It wasn't just the battle losses that caused Napoleon's downfall. It was the strategic destruction of the land that made his invasion unmanageable. The long-term impact of this tactic was the recognition of its effectiveness in warfare. Scorched earth has been used in countless conflicts since then. The tactic emphasizes the importance of logistics in military strategy, showing that victory on the battlefield is not just about direct confrontation, but about starving the enemy of the means to continue fighting. The scorched earth strategy is a chilling reminder that war is not just about winning battles. It's about exhausting the enemy and breaking their will to fight. It's a tactic that uses the environment as an ally, turning the land itself into an impenetrable obstacle. It may be brutal, but history has shown time and again how effective it can be in breaking even the most powerful invaders. Now, we come to one of the most brilliant and devastating military tactics ever employed: the double enveloping maneuver. This strategy was masterfully executed by Hannibal at the Battle of Cannae in 216 BCE, and later by Genghis Khan and his Mongol hordes. The double enveloping tactic revolves around surrounding the enemy on all sides, cutting off their escape and annihilating them without mercy. It's a tactic that, when executed correctly, leaves the enemy with no chance of survival. The double enveloping maneuver is best known for its use by the Carthaginian general Hannibal at the Battle of Cannae during the Second Punic War, but it was also employed by Genghis Khan during his campaigns across Asia in the 13th century. This tactic involves surrounding the enemy in such a way that they are trapped from all sides, forcing them into a position where retreat is impossible and total destruction is inevitable. At Cannae, Hannibal faced a much larger Roman army and, using his superior strategy, executed the double enveloping tactic to perfection. The Romans, trapped and surrounded, had no chance to escape and were completely decimated. Genghis Khan, meanwhile, used this tactic in several key battles to destroy vast armies, using his unparalleled mobility and discipline to trap his foes in similar fashion. The double enveloping tactic relies on the principle of encirclement. The attacking army first positions its forces around the enemy on two sides, creating a semicircle. Then, as the battle intensifies, the attacking forces move inward, tightening the circle. The key to this tactic is to strike with such speed and precision that the enemy has no opportunity to break out or regroup. Hannibal's use of this strategy at Cannae is the most famous example. His forces, though outnumbered, lured the Roman legions into the center of his army, where they were surrounded on both flanks. As the Romans pressed forward, they unknowingly moved deeper into the trap. The Carthaginian forces closed in from all sides, and the Romans found themselves stuck in a killing zone with no escape route. The result was one of the worst defeats in Roman history. Genghis Khan employed similar tactics, often using his cavalry's exceptional mobility to flank and encircle enemy forces. His speed and the discipline of his troops allowed him to outmaneuver larger, slower armies, eventually trapping them in a vice-like grip and overwhelming them. The Mongols would often take advantage of terrain, using hills and valleys to funnel enemies into kill zones where they could be crushed under the weight of a two-sided attack. The double enveloping maneuver had an immediate and profound impact on the battlefield. In the case of Cannae, Hannibal's forces killed or captured nearly 80,000 Roman soldiers, an astounding loss that sent shockwaves through the Roman Republic. The battle is still studied today as one of the most decisive and tactically perfect victories in military history. For Genghis Khan, The success of the double enveloping tactic was a major factor in his ability to conquer vast territories with a relatively small force. The Mongols' use of this strategy, combined with their psychological warfare and fearsome reputation, made them nearly unstoppable. In every campaign, the ability to trap an enemy and eliminate them swiftly led to Mongol victories across Asia and into Europe. The long-lasting impact of this maneuver is still felt today in military strategy. The double enveloping tactic showed the power of encirclement and how controlling the enemy's options could guarantee victory. Armies that adopt this tactic, especially when they are outnumbered, have the chance to neutralize their opponent's strength and create a decisive advantage. It remains a classic example of the importance of strategy over mere strength. The double enveloping tactic is a chilling reminder of how precision and strategy can turn the tide of war. By outflanking and surrounding the enemy, it forces them into a situation where they are powerless, facing inevitable defeat. Both Hannibal and Genghis Khan proved that, with the right strategy, even the smallest forces can achieve crushing victories, and their success with the double enveloping maneuver changed the course of history forever. Next, we delve into one of the most crucial and time-consuming aspects of warfare throughout history: the siege. The ability to lay siege to a city, break through its walls, and eventually force its surrender has shaped military strategy for centuries. The Assyrians, medieval armies, and the Ottomans each developed unique approaches to this type of warfare, adapting their tactics to take down what seemed like impenetrable fortifications. Today, we'll explore how sieges, from ancient Mesopotamia to the rise of gunpowder, brought mighty cities to their knees. The siege has been a hallmark of warfare since the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrians were among the first to effectively use siege tactics in their conquest of fortified cities, and this would influence military strategies for generations. As time progressed, medieval armies, such as those during the Crusades, adopted similar tactics, but also innovated with new methods, including siege towers and trebuchets. Perhaps one of the most dramatic changes in siege warfare came with the use of artillery. The Ottomans, during their conquest of Constantinople in 1453, used massive cannons to breach the city's walls. These powerful new weapons made even the most well-defended cities vulnerable and marked a turning point in siege tactics. Siege warfare typically followed a few key steps: isolating the city, cutting off supplies, and using a variety of techniques to breach or weaken the walls. The Assyrians mastered the first part, blockading a city by surrounding it with their forces and cutting off food and water supplies, creating a slow but inevitable collapse. However, it was the technological innovations of later periods that made sieges more destructive. In the medieval period, armies began using large siege engines like trebuchets and battering rams to break down walls. The trebuchet, a giant catapult, could launch massive stones at walls, while battering rams struck at the gates. The use of siege towers allowed troops to scale city walls and engage defenders from above. The Ottomans, with their superior gunpowder technology, brought a game-changing weapon to sieges: massive cannons. The Ottoman Empire's use of these cannons during the siege of Constantinople was groundbreaking. The cannons were capable of firing enormous stone projectiles, which could smash through thick fortifications that had withstood centuries of attacks. This artillery revolutionized how cities were taken, making the traditional methods of siege warfare seem outdated. The impact of siege warfare was enormous. For the Assyrians, the use of siege tactics was a way to intimidate and dominate. Cities that resisted were often reduced to rubble, with entire populations either killed or enslaved. This brutal efficiency instilled fear across the ancient world. In the medieval period, sieges were often prolonged affairs, with both attackers and defenders using a variety of tactics to gain an advantage. The Crusaders, for instance, would lay siege to key cities in the Holy Land, relying on a mixture of military engineering and starvation tactics to force the defenders to surrender. However, the true game-changer came with the advent of artillery. The Ottomans' success in Constantinople was a pivotal moment. The fall of the city marked the end of the Byzantine Empire and the beginning of Ottoman dominance in southeastern Europe. The use of cannons forced the rest of Europe to re-evaluate their approach to fortifications and led to a massive shift in military engineering, with walls being designed to withstand artillery fire rather than just traditional siege tactics. The history of siege warfare is a tale of relentless innovation and brutal efficiency. The Assyrians showed how to starve a city into submission, while medieval armies used ingenious machines to break through defenses. But it was the Ottomans' use of massive cannons that truly revolutionized the art of siege. These tactics, though developed centuries ago, still influence modern military strategy, reminding us that with the right resources and determination, even the most fortified cities can be brought down. In the battlefields of history, sometimes the most effective strategy isn't about strength in numbers, but about the power of speed, surprise, and mobility. This brings us to guerrilla warfare, an unconventional strategy that has turned the tides of some of the most iconic conflicts in history. Whether it was the American colonists fighting against the British Empire or the Viet Cong challenging the might of the United States, guerrilla warfare has proven time and again that small, highly mobile forces can overwhelm larger, better-equipped armies. Guerrilla warfare became a defining strategy in both the American Revolution and the Vietnam War. During the Revolutionary War, American colonists, outnumbered and outgunned by the British, resorted to small, fast-moving attacks that would disrupt supply lines, sabotage key infrastructure, and harass British forces. Similarly, in the Vietnam War, the Viet Cong used the dense jungles of Southeast Asia to their advantage, employing hit-and-run tactics against the US military's larger and more conventional forces. At its core, guerrilla warfare revolves around using agility and knowledge of the terrain to offset the enemy's numerical or technological advantage. Rather than engaging in direct large-scale battles, guerrilla fighters use ambushes, sabotage, and rapid retreats to keep the enemy off balance and unprepared. In the American Revolution, for example, figures like Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox, led small bands of militia in surprise attacks on British supply lines, ambushing troops in forests and swamps before disappearing into the wilderness. These hit-and-run tactics, combined with an intimate knowledge of the local terrain, kept the much larger British forces in constant uncertainty, weakening their morale and ability to maintain control. Similarly, during the Vietnam War, the Viet Cong used the dense jungles, underground tunnels, and rural villages as their battleground. They would ambush American troops, plant booby traps, and then melt back into the jungle before a counterattack could be launched. The element of surprise and the unpredictability of these attacks frustrated the US military, which was used to more traditional, organized warfare. Guerrilla warfare's impact on military strategy is undeniable. During the American Revolution, it was instrumental in undermining British forces and playing a critical role in securing American independence. The British, unable to cope with the hit-and-run tactics and their reliance on traditional military strategies, were slowly worn down, allowing the American colonists to gain the upper hand. In Vietnam, the success of guerrilla tactics against the United States reshaped how the world viewed military power. The United States, despite having superior technology and resources, was unable to defeat a smaller, less equipped force due to the unpredictability and resilience of guerrilla warfare. The conflict in Vietnam demonstrated that warfare is not always won by technological superiority, but by adaptability and resolve. The legacy of guerrilla warfare continues to influence modern conflicts today. From insurgencies in the Middle East to the tactics used by modern rebel groups, guerrilla warfare remains a potent tool for smaller forces facing larger, more powerful enemies. Guerrilla warfare proves that, in the right hands, even a small force can defy the odds. Through quick strikes, deep knowledge of the terrain, and a relentless pursuit of the enemy's vulnerabilities, guerrilla fighters have changed the course of history in some of the world's most iconic conflicts. Whether it was securing the freedom of a nation or challenging the might of a superpower, guerrilla warfare has proven that victory is not always determined by strength, but by strategy. In the annals of military history, few tactics have had as profound an impact on modern warfare as the Blitzkrieg strategy that combined speed, surprise, and overwhelming force to redefine the way wars were fought. Used with devastating effect by Nazi Germany in World War II, the Blitzkrieg demonstrated the power of swift, coordinated attacks that would break through enemy lines before they could even react. It was a new kind of warfare, one where speed and precision were the keys to victory. Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, was first employed by Germany during the early stages of World War II. The tactic was used to rapidly defeat opponents through fast, concentrated assaults that targeted critical points in the enemy's defense. The most notable use of Blitzkrieg was during the invasion of Poland in 1939. followed by the rapid conquests of France and other European nations in the early years of the war. Blitzkrieg relied on a combination of highly mobile infantry, tanks, artillery, and air support, all working together in coordinated waves to overwhelm enemy defenses. The key to this strategy was its speed and the shock factor it created, rather than traditional drawn-out battles where armies would face off in large, static engagements. Blitzkrieg sought to break the enemy's will to fight by striking fast and hard, often bypassing heavily fortified areas in favor of attacking weaker points. A key element of Blitzkrieg was the use of mechanized infantry and tanks, known as panzer divisions. These mobile units would surge ahead of the slower infantry forces, pushing through the enemy's front lines and creating chaos behind them. The Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, played a crucial role in the strategy as well, providing bombings that disrupted communication lines and supply routes, further isolating the enemy and preventing any coordinated defense. The speed of the attacks left little time for the enemy to react, often resulting in quick, decisive victories. During the invasion of France in 1940, German forces bypassed the heavily fortified Maginot Line and struck through the Ardennes forest, a region thought to be impassable for a large military force. This surprise maneuver led to the rapid collapse of French defenses and the fall of Paris within weeks. Blitzkrieg forever changed the landscape of modern warfare. Its effectiveness in the early stages of World War II demonstrated the importance of speed, coordination, and technological innovation. The strategy forced militaries around the world to reconsider how they trained and equipped their forces. The emphasis on fast, mobile units over static defense lines and trench warfare marked a shift in the way wars would be fought in the 20th century. However, the very nature of Blitzkrieg also exposed its weaknesses. While it was highly effective in the early phases of the war, it relied heavily on momentum and surprise. Once the initial shock of the attack wore off, and as enemy forces adapted to the new tactics, Blitzkrieg became less effective. This was evident in the later stages of the war, where the Allies countered with their own technological advances and adapted tactics, ultimately leading to the downfall of the Nazi regime. In the long term, Blitzkrieg influenced military doctrines worldwide, particularly in how modern armies approach rapid deployments and the integration of air and ground forces. The emphasis on speed and mobility continues to influence military tactics today, seen in everything from tank warfare to airstrikes, and is a reminder of how a single strategy can alter the course of history. Blitzkrieg, with its shock and speed, changed the face of warfare. It showed the world that in the modern age of warfare, victory wasn't just about the size of your army, it was about how quickly and decisively you could strike. Today, the legacy of Blitzkrieg lives on in the rapid deployment strategies and fast-moving operations that define modern conflict. In the brutal world of warfare, there's a tactic that goes beyond weapons and strategy, one that manipulates the mind itself. The psychological war, or psychological warfare, harnesses fear, misinformation, and psychological manipulation to break the enemy's spirit before a single shot is fired. From the ancient Assyrians to the Mongol conquests, and even during the dark days of World War II, psychological warfare proved time and again that sometimes the mind is more powerful than the sword. The concept of psychological warfare dates back to the ancient world, with some of the earliest and most effective examples coming from the Assyrian Empire and the Mongol invasions. The Assyrians were known for their terrifying tactics, using fear as a weapon in their military campaigns. Fast forward to World War II, and psychological warfare took on a new dimension, with both the Axis and Allied powers employing strategies designed to demoralize and manipulate entire populations and military forces. Psychological warfare relies on creating fear and confusion to disrupt the enemy's morale and decision-making abilities. The Assyrians, for example, would leave the heads of their enemies on display to terrify and intimidate the surrounding regions. The sheer brutality of their tactics was intended to break the will to fight before the battle even began. Such acts of terror were meant to send a message: surrender or face total destruction. Similarly, the Mongols, under Genghis Khan, understood the power of fear. They would often spread rumors of their terrifying conquests, causing panic and fear among enemy populations long before they ever arrived. Once in battle, the Mongols would use psychological tactics like feigned retreats, drawing enemies into traps where they would be overwhelmed by their superior numbers and strategy. During World War II, Both the Axis and Allied forces used propaganda, misinformation, and psychological operations to influence civilian populations and soldiers alike. The Nazis, for instance, employed terror and intimidation to keep occupied populations in line. The Allies countered with leaflets and radio broadcasts designed to demoralize enemy soldiers, offering them the chance to surrender and save their lives, or portraying their leaders as weak and unfit for command. One of the most famous examples of psychological warfare during World War II was the use of black propaganda. The Allies used fake broadcasts and fake news reports designed to deceive the enemy, while simultaneously spreading fear within the ranks of the Axis powers. These tactics created confusion and doubt, undermining the enemy's confidence and causing them to make poor decisions. Psychological warfare proved to be an incredibly powerful tool throughout history. By manipulating the mind, it became possible to weaken an enemy without ever needing to engage in direct combat. The Assyrians and Mongols understood that terror could be as effective as the sharp edge of a sword, and their use of fear tactics helped to expand and solidify their empires. In World War II, psychological warfare became a cornerstone of military strategy. Its impact is still felt today, as modern militaries continue to use psychological tactics in warfare, whether it's through propaganda, misinformation, or leveraging fear to disrupt the enemy's confidence. The psychological aspect of war remains a critical factor in modern conflict, but the true power of psychological warfare lies in its ability to influence the human psyche. It exploits fear, uncertainty, and doubt to achieve victory, proving that the battlefield is not just fought with weapons, but with the mind as well. From the ancient empires of Assyria and Mongolia to the great global conflict of the Second World War, psychological warfare has shaped the outcomes of countless battles. The terrifying power of fear, more powerful than any sword, remains a haunting reminder of how the human mind can be both a weapon and a shield in the chaos of war. In the modern age of warfare, it's not just about the battles you win on the ground, it's also about winning the hearts and minds of the people. Military propaganda, a tool used by empires throughout history, proves that shaping public opinion can be just as important as the strategy of war itself. Whether to rally, support, demonize the enemy, or maintain morale, propaganda has been a powerful weapon in the arsenal of empires and governments alike. The use of propaganda in warfare became particularly prominent with the rise of modern empires and nation-states. From the imperial powers of Europe during the World Wars to the Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union, military propaganda has been an integral part of shaping the direction of global conflicts. In World War I and World War II, propaganda posters, speeches, and media campaigns became essential in mobilizing entire populations for war, both on the battlefield and at home. Military propaganda works by influencing the perceptions, emotions, and beliefs of a population to support the goals of war. During World War I, for example, both the Allied and Central Powers utilized posters, newspapers, and films to stir nationalistic pride, vilify the enemy, and convince citizens that they were fighting for a noble cause. The British, for instance, created powerful imagery of Germans as monstrous enemies who threatened the very existence of civilization, while emphasizing the heroic duty of every man and woman to contribute to the war effort. In World War II, propaganda took on an even more sophisticated and widespread role. Governments used radio broadcasts, leaflets, and film to create narratives that shaped public opinion. The Nazis, under Joseph Goebbels, created a massive propaganda machine that controlled the media and disseminated messages designed to inspire loyalty to the regime, while dehumanizing Jews, communists, and other perceived enemies. On the other side, the Allies used similar tactics to create a sense of unity, portraying the war as a fight for freedom against the oppressive forces of tyranny. During the Cold War, propaganda evolved further as both the United States and the Soviet Union fought for global influence. The US employed films, radio programs, and cultural diplomacy to present itself as a beacon of democracy, while the Soviet Union used media to promote its ideology of communism and portray the West as decadent and corrupt. The competition was not just military, it was ideological, and propaganda played a key role in this battle for minds and hearts. The impact of military propaganda has been immense throughout history. It has the power to rally entire nations to war, boost morale, and justify actions that might otherwise be unthinkable. Propaganda shapes public perception of enemies, making them seem more dangerous, and builds narratives that justify violence, conquest, and even genocide. It ensures the cohesion of a population during times of crisis, making them believe that the sacrifices they make are for the greater good. Perhaps one of the most profound effects of propaganda is its long-term influence on national identity and memory. The way a country portrays its past wars, heroes, and enemies shapes how future generations will understand their history and their place in the world. This effect can be seen in the way post-war propaganda helped to establish the image of the good guys and the bad guys in historical narratives, making it easier to justify future conflicts under the banner of righteousness. In the modern world, propaganda remains a potent tool in both military and political strategy. While the tactics have evolved, the core principle remains the same. Winning the hearts and minds of the people is just as critical as winning on the battlefield. From the fiery posters of World War I to the Cold War radio broadcasts, military propaganda has been a driving force in shaping not just the course of wars, but the very identities of nations. As long as conflicts continue to rage, the battle for public opinion will remain as important as any battle fought with weapons on the ground. After all, if you can shape the mind of the people, you can shape the world itself. In the world of warfare, the element of surprise can be a game changer. The concept of a preemptive strike attacking an enemy before they have the chance to act has been a decisive tactic in numerous pivotal moments of history. It's a strategy that requires precision, boldness, and the willingness to act before the enemy can mount any defense. From Pearl Harbor to the Six-Day War, the effectiveness of a preemptive strike has been proven time and again in shaping the course of history. The preemptive attack is best exemplified by two iconic moments in history: the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941 and Israel's strike against Arab forces in 1967 during the Six-Day War. Both of these incidents were not merely battles. They were the embodiment of the idea of striking first to eliminate a perceived threat before it could escalate. In 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on the United States Pacific Fleet, crippling its ability to retaliate. In 1967, Israel initiated a devastating airstrike against neighboring Arab countries, neutralizing their air forces and ensuring military superiority. A preemptive attack is based on the principle that acting first prevents the enemy from gaining an upper hand. The key is to strike at the enemy's vulnerabilities before they have a chance to mobilize or counterattack. At Pearl Harbor, Japan's decision to launch a surprise airstrike on the American naval base in Hawaii was driven by the desire to eliminate the US Pacific Fleet, which could potentially disrupt Japan's expansion in the Pacific. The goal was to strike fast and hard, leaving the enemy no time to prepare for retaliation. Similarly, during the Six-Day War in 1967, Israel launched Operation Focus, a surprise aerial assault on Egyptian, Jordanian, and Syrian air bases. The strategy was to destroy enemy aircraft on the ground, ensuring air superiority from the outset of the conflict. The speed and effectiveness of the Israeli attack overwhelmed the Arab forces and allowed Israel to dominate the battlefield, effectively changing the dynamics of the entire war. The impact of preemptive strikes is far-reaching and often carries consequences beyond the immediate battle. In the case of Pearl Harbor, while Japan achieved temporary success, the attack galvanized the United States into entering World War II. The long-term effects of this attack ultimately led to Japan's defeat. For Israel, the preemptive strike in 1967 was a resounding success, allowing them to secure victory within days. However, it also led to long-lasting geopolitical consequences in the Middle East, including the occupation of territories that continue to be a source of tension to this day. The strategic value of a preemptive strike lies in its ability to level the playing field by striking at the core of the enemy's strengths. By neutralizing critical military assets early on, the attacking side can gain an overwhelming advantage. However, the moral and political implications of such a tactic can be complex. While it may be seen as a necessary action for survival, it can also spark international outrage and lead to escalation, as was the case with the US entry into World War II after Pearl Harbor. In modern times, the principle of preemptive strikes has been debated and employed in different forms, especially in conflicts involving nuclear weapons or global superpowers. The decision to strike first can often be a gamble one that, if successful, ensures dominance, but if it fails, can lead to catastrophic consequences. In the volatile world of warfare, the preemptive attack remains one of the most audacious and risky strategies. While it has the potential to secure a swift victory, it also carries the weight of moral and strategic complexity. Whether in the skies over Pearl Harbor or the deserts of the Middle East, the question remains, when is it right to strike first? And what are the costs of unleashing this powerful weapon of war? As we reflect on these 10 military tactics, it's clear that their impact stretches far beyond the battlefields of their time. These strategies not only reshaped the course of history, but also laid the foundation for the evolution of warfare itself. From the flexible formations of the Roman legions to the psychological terror wielded by the Assyrians, each tactic transformed how empires fought and won wars. What is truly remarkable is how many of these tactics are still relevant today. The core principles behind strategies like Blitzkrieg, guerrilla warfare, and preemptive strikes continued to shape military doctrines. In modern warfare, while the tools may have changed, ranging from tanks to drones and cyber attacks, the essence of strategic thinking remains rooted in the same timeless concepts of surprise, speed, and intelligence. So, where does this leave us in the future of war? Will we see a time when artificial intelligence and drones replace the legendary generals of the past? As technology continues to advance, we are witnessing a shift towards automated warfare. In the coming decades, battles may no longer be decided by human hands alone, but by algorithms and machines. The question becomes, will future wars be fought with the same brilliance and audacity of those who shaped history, or will they be won by the cold precision of artificial intelligence? Will we remember the leaders of tomorrow, as we remember figures like Alexander the Great or Napoleon? Or will the battles of the future be more about tech than tactics? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, the legacy of these military strategies will live on, continuously influencing the way the world approaches conflict. As we look back at these game-changing tactics, we are reminded of how far humanity has come in understanding the art of war. But as we march into the future, it's not only the power of armies that will shape the world, but the power of minds, both human and machine. And who knows, perhaps the wars of tomorrow will be won by a combination of the brilliance of past strategies and the new frontiers of technology. Now that we've explored these 10 military tactics that shaped the world, I want to hear from you. Which of these strategies do you think was the most effective? Was it the speed and surprise of Blitzkrieg, or the brilliance of Hannibal's double envelopment at Cannae? And maybe you know of other game-changing military strategies that didn't make the list. If so, drop them in the comments below. We love hearing your thoughts and discussing the history that continues to impact us today. If you enjoyed this deep dive into military history and want to see more epic stories, don't forget to subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an incredible exploration of the past. Trust me, you won't want to miss what we have in store next. Until then, stay curious and keep exploring the powerful strategies that changed the world.